Hey everybody, and welcome to our latest conceptual list. Now, this one was based on an article by Paul Sutherland, and I raise that for an important reason. In the meantime, however, I'm Sean Ferrick, I'm here for Trek Culture, and here are 10 incredible Star Trek concept art designs you need to see. Number 10, San Francisco, Star Trek Into Darkness. As often happens along the way during any storyboarding to filming process, what they originally designed was of course not what they ended up showing on screen. What we also saw in Star Trek Into Darkness was the lovely Paul Sutherland. He is in that film getting absolutely smushed out of it by the saucer section of the USS Vengeance. Paul, gone too soon, mate. Gone too soon. Nathan Schroeder was the designer in the art department who worked on a much more futuristic version of Star Trek's main city for Starfleet headquarters. There was walkways, there was holographic displays, everything in these beautiful storyboards. However, J.J. Abrams elected not to go with those designs, going for something a little bit more modern in terms of easier to film, but much of the action was more suggested than actually seen. So, unfortunately, Schroeder's art was kind of put to the side, and poor Paulie got smushed. Number 9, the D4 class Klingon battlecruiser, Star Trek Enterprise. This one's actually really frustrating because there were some really poor decisions that led to this not being shown in the show. So the script for Enterprise's third episode, Unexpected, called for a Klingon ship to be present. This is set long before the time of Kirk and long before the time of the classic D7 class battlecruiser. Certainly long before the Ketinga class battlecruiser that would have turned up in the movies. John Eves and the art department began working on a new design of Klingon ship, one that would both honor what was to come but show it from a much earlier design standpoint. CG artist Pierre Droulet brought this thing to life, and it's very evocative of the D7 to come, but you can see there's much more of a framework about it. The nacelles are hollowed out a little bit, and of course the neck has those support structures on it. Frustrating is that this was finished in time for the episode, and then the producer stepped in. They said that they wanted the ship to have more prominent windows, and so they tossed the entire design. They then elected to go with the CGI Ketinga that had been designed for DS9 and Star Trek Voyager. It was clearly out of time. I can remember back in 2001 watching this episode and going, wait, that's not right. Because this is a ship from a couple of hundred years in Archer's future that the NX-01 has to deal with, presenting two problems. One, was there time travel and we should address this? Or two, what the heck have Starfleet been doing? Because the Klingons were able to just nail it on the first go. Now, Eves never actually let go of his baby and actually submitted it as a design for Star Trek 2009. Now, they elected not to go with the design again, which again is frustrating, but it was thankfully brought to life by the Eagle Moss collection as well. So it is out there for collectors, and I can tell you, it's a lovely model. Number 8, Enterprise's interiors, Star Trek the video game. Star Trek's Into Darkness video game tie-in was, unfortunately, a flop. It didn't do well commercially, it also didn't do well critically. It got fairly panned. J.J. Abrams even suggested that the reason Into Darkness didn't do as well at the box office was directly because of this video game. While the game itself might be questionable, the actual design is really stunning. If you think about in Star Trek 09 and Into Darkness and beyond, we really see crew quarters, the engine room, the transporter room, the medical bay, and the bridge. Obviously there's a smattering of other things, but that's kind of it. Illustrator Mike Sabalge designed something that was evocative of the motion picture. Think of the rec deck on the motion picture, and you have chairs and you have glass tables and you have room to actually chill out, because in the movies we didn't really get to see that very much. Even the crew quarters were quite sparse. This gave the ship a bit more of a lived-in feel, while also being somewhere that you could wind down at the end of a day. Something that Seth MacFarlane's The Orville has been very, very good at realizing. Number 7. Starfleet uniforms, Star Trek Discovery. Gersha Phillips' designs for Star Trek Discovery have grown on a lot of people, while they were slightly jarring in the beginning because they were closer, really, to these jumpsuits of the Enterprise. So you had the blue with a kind of a metallic piping on the uniforms we got on screen. Well, that is quite evocative of the jumpsuits that Archer and Hoshi and Reed all wore on Enterprise. They had their blue jumpsuits with their coloured piping on it. Now, there was originally ideas to make the uniforms into effectively what we saw on Pike's crew in season 2 of Discovery, that you would have your colour by division that was split initially into a two-piece. Then there was also the potential for it to be a jumpsuit, which would have been almost a direct lift from Enterprise. Now, as season 2 of Discovery went on, Phillips got a chance to introduce these into the canon as well. Then, of course, going forward into season 3 of Discovery, there's an entirely new set of uniforms as well. So, in one way, Discovery has been absolutely fantastic for giving the audience a variety to look at in terms of the aesthetic on screen. Number 6, the USS Iowa, Star Trek 2009. In a way, you have seen this ship. The original idea for the USS Kelvin was to be the USS Iowa. It was renamed to honor J.J. Abrams' grandfather, Henry Kelvin, as production went along, as he likes to get that name into each of the films that he directs. Kelvin pods, USS Kelvin, Kelvin Station in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Originally, it was going to be called the USS Iowa as a throwback joke to Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. In that film, over lovely pizza and a glass of Michelob, Admiral Kirk tells Gillian Taylor that he was born in Iowa. He only works in outer space. They were going to make that the gag, that the Narada would come through and attack the Iowa, but Kirk would still be born. As that went along, they decided that no, maybe it was a little bit too on the nose. I personally would have enjoyed that, but you know. But what they did do originally was that because the Kelvin was still technically from our Prime universe, the design was going to be a lot closer to the original series aesthetic of the time. As production went along, they weathered it up a little bit, they made it look a bit older, and it was closer to then what we saw with the Kelvin Enterprise. So jury's out, really, on which one would have been better. I think they're both quite strong designs, and frankly, in my head, there's a USS Iowa flying around out there somewhere. Number 5, Mirror Culber, Star Trek Discovery. Full disclosure, this list was written before season 3 of Discovery aired, but I've chosen to include it in this list because this was something that really paid off. The original concept design for Culber in the Mirror universe in Star Trek Discovery was actually scrapped because producer Aaron Harberts didn't want to spoil Wilson Cruz's good guy image. As Wilson Cruz is potentially one of the nicest people on the planet, I think it would take rather a lot to spoil that image. Yes, I'm asking for him to come to my birthday party. He did pop up in Mirror Universe in Terra Firma in the 3rd season of Star Trek Discovery. Now, he didn't do very much, he was just there in the background, but we finally got to see realized the red slashed over design of his uniform. And that's kind of what we've been hoping for since season 1. Sits there with bloody fabulous eyeliner that I have tried to pull off, and I am woefully bad at it. But even just in standing there, that look achieves what they set out to do. He is imposing, he is a little bit scary looking, but we still love him. Number 4, Giant Green Hand, Star Trek Beyond. Scotty lists one of the potential reasons behind the disappearance of the USS Franklin as a giant green space hand in Star Trek Beyond. Now, obviously, this is a callback to the original series episode Who Mourns for Adonis, where a giant green space hand stops the Enterprise, well, in space. Early production artwork on Star Trek Beyond by Nadia To shows a more naturalistic description and depiction of the Green Hand. It was based a little bit more on the real pillars of creation. Unfortunately, it was not used in the final film. The green space hand had appeared in the closing credits as well as a bit of fun, really a nod to the original series. Now, I will be totally honest, it is quite hard in today's modern day and age to pull off a giant green hand in space and have it be something serious. Doesn't mean they shouldn't try. Number 3, Synth Factory, Star Trek Picard. Production illustrator Laurent Ben-Maimon designed a lot of scenes that would end up becoming abandoned in the making of Star Trek Picard, and one of these scenes depicted the making of the synths. The synth robots are directly responsible for the attack on Mars and the deaths of 19,000 people. However, of course, in a way, they're not responsible because they were hacked and reprogrammed. Oh, spoilers, I guess. There was a sequence, however, that showed them in their factory getting put together. Now, the people working in this factory were all wearing what seemed to be Star Trek Discovery era medical uniforms. Hopefully now, I will say that that was a placeholder illustration, because I was not sold on the Discovery era shuttle being around in Star Trek Picard's time. So, same with the uniforms. I'm not really sure. However, that aside, that's definitely a sequence I would have loved to have seen. I think there should have been more of an exploration of the synth workers in Star Trek Picard, considering how important they were to the plot. Having said all that, season 2 is on the way, so you never know. Number 2, the USS Archer, Star Trek Online. Star Trek Online is roughly 11 years old at this point, but it was actually in development back in 2006. John Eaves, who had just come off the unfortunate cancellation of Star Trek Enterprise, was commissioned to design a few updated 25th century ships for the game. Now, some of the designs would, by today, look very familiar. One such ship was the Tahoe-class USS Archer. Now, if you look closely at it, you can see that this ship, it owes a lot to the Sovereign-class Enterprise E. Now, John Eaves designed the Enterprise E originally with forward-facing nacelles. Still has that saucer section that's more of an oval than anything else, and several of the very early versions of the Enterprise match pretty closely to this design. The Sovereign class ended up becoming a sleeker, longer vessel, but this design was not abandoned altogether. In fact, it resurfaced in Star Trek Picard as the Inquiry class ship. The USS Zhang He, for one, was this, as you can see as well, it's both got that oval, but a sort of triangular oval saucer section. Triovular? Ovangular? It's got that shape of a saucer section anyway, with these forward tilted nacelles. Now, in this scene, it's very hard to see, of course, but in this scene, there are a few different variations on the ship. They are roughly quite similar, so militarily, I guess I can understand building a fairly similar fleet altogether. At least then you know what's at your back and at your side. But who am I to judge? Number 1, Abandoned SARU, Star Trek Discovery. Neville Page and Glenn Hittrick are two people who clearly studied at H.R. Giger's foot, because the original idea for SARU would have people up because they couldn't sleep for the nightmares. Bonkers design had SARU in a somewhat Y-shaped head with 10 eyeballs. Now, quickly they realised that this was going to mask an awful lot of Doug Jones's expression on his face, and would also need a lot of animatronics and CGI to realise this in any episode or scene that he appeared in. So the idea was abandoned. Very late into the production schedule, a new design that allowed Doug Jones to really express both in his eyes, in his mouth. It is definitely unique and it definitely stands out. Yes, I might have struggled with it somewhat as the captain or someone who we're spending a lot of emotional moments with, but it will be a crying shame for this to be abandoned forever. That's it for our list today, guys. A big thank you to Paul Sutherland for writing this article. The original article, in fact, has a few more points on it, so please make sure to check that out. Remember that you can catch us over on Twitter at Trek Culture. You can catch myself at Sean Ferrick on Twitter as well. If you reckon we missed any designs, drop it into the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And remember guys, look after yourselves, look after everyone near and dear to you, and live long and prosper.